An old man is pounding on my front door so hard the frame is rattling. He's red-faced, out of breath, sweating through his collar and screaming that he's going to kick my ass. His crime? Someone mowed his lawn for free. Stick around. Because 8 months later, that same man is standing in a jungle of knee-high grass, fighting a broken push mower that keeps jamming every 3 feet while I sit on my porch, drinking coffee, watching the whole thing unfold like it's the best show on television. If you've ever dealt with a neighbor who turned a good deed into a personal insult, if you know the specific rage of someone yelling at you for something that wasn't even your fault, you are going to love this one. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and let's get into one of the pettiest, most satisfying slices of neighborhood karma I've ever come across. Picture a quiet residential street. Nothing special, the kind of block with cracked sidewalks, a couple of oak trees old enough to remember disco, and neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. Our narrator lived in a small house with an even smaller yard. We're talking a patch of grass you could mow in the time it takes to boil an egg. Right next door sat a duplicate of that same house, identical floor plan, identical roofline, except this one was abandoned, empty, nobody home, nobody watching, nobody caring. Just a vacant lot sandwiched between two lives that were about to collide in the pettiest way imaginable. And on the corner, anchoring this little trio of properties, sat the big house. Wraparound yard, well-kept hedges, the kind of lawn a retiree puts real pride into. That's where the third character in this story lived. A widower, semi-retired, with nothing but time on his hands and an itch to stay busy. Our narrator wasn't lazy. The yard wasn't a disaster. It just needed attention, the way every yard eventually does. And on this particular morning, before coffee, before breakfast, before any real thoughts, had formed a sound cut through the quiet. A mower. Running. Close. Too close. The grateful discovery. Our narrator sat up in bed, heart already doing that low thud of dread, because in America, an unexpected mower on a Tuesday morning usually means one thing. The city showed up to cite you, and they're about to hand you a fine. So absurd, you'll wonder if grass height is now a felony. So they threw on whatever clothes were closest, stumbled to the front door half expecting a clipboard and a citation, and found something completely different. An old man, weathered ball cap, sun-spotted forearms, riding mower rumbling beneath him like a tractor with opinions. Not a city worker, not a warning, just a bored retiree who'd finished his own yard, decided he wasn't ready to go back inside yet, and figured why not keep going. He'd mowed the vacant lot next door because it was connected to his property line, and it bothered him to look at. And since he was already out there, already sweating, already committed, he just kept the mower running right onto our narrator's lawn too. No knock, no note, no bill. Just an old man doing what old men with riding mowers and too much time apparently do. Fixing things nobody asked him to fix, because it satisfies something in them to see order restored. Our narrator wasn't about to argue with free lawn care. If a stranger wants to spend his Saturday mowing your grass out of the sheer joy of finishing a job, you say thank you, and you mean it. For a few days, this was simply a nice thing that happened. A small, forgettable kindness. The kind of story you'd tell at a barbecue, and everyone would nod and say, "That's a good neighbor." It was not going to stay that simple. The storm at the door. A couple days later, the pounding started. Not a knock, pounding. The kind that makes you flinch out of a dead sleep. The kind where your stomach drops before your brain even catches up to what's happening, because some primal part of you already knows. This isn't good news. Our narrator opened the door to find a second old man, but nothing like the first. Where the retiree radiated an easy, help-yourself kind of energy, this man radiated something else entirely. Fury, mixed with the particular exhaustion of someone who is far, far too out of shape for confrontation. He'd made the 15-foot walk from his car to the front porch, and he was already gasping, panting between words which, if you think about it for even a second, should have been the first sign that this whole situation was more comedy than threat. But in the moment, standing there in a doorway, at whatever o'clock in the morning, it didn't feel funny. It felt like being cornered. "You mowed my yard?" he wheezed. jabbing a finger. I know it was you. That's trespassing. You don't touch my property. You understand me? Don't. Fuck. With me. He said it like a threat that had been rehearsed in his car on the drive over, like he'd spent the whole trip building himself up into something intimidating, and now he was cashing in every ounce of that manufactured rage on a stranger who hadn't even touched his mower. Here's the part that makes this so deliciously unfair. Our narrator hadn't laid a single finger on that man's lawn, didn't own a mower, didn't ask anyone to touch that middle lot. The entire situation had been engineered, unprompted, by a kind stranger on a riding mower who was simply too polite to stop once he'd gotten going. And yet here was this man, red in the face, breathless, hovering in the doorway like he was one shove away from a heart attack, threatening to kick my ass over an act of unrequested kindness. There's a very specific, very human kind of anger that comes from being blamed for something you didn't do, delivered by someone who clearly enjoys being angry. It sits in your chest like a hot coal. You want to defend yourself, but you also don't want to escalate a confrontation with a man who's already breathing like he just ran a marathon. So our narrator did the smartest thing possible. End of quote. They just let him finish, nodded, let the threats bounce off, and closed the door once he'd run out of steam, which, given his physical condition, didn't take long. The turning point. A few days passed, and then, right on schedule, the familiar hum of that riding mower rolled back into earshot. This time, our narrator didn't wait around wondering. They walked straight outside, flagged the old man down mid-pass, and laid the whole thing out, the pounding on the door, the threats, the wheezing tirade about trespassing. The retiree didn't even blink. He just let out a short laugh, shook his head, and said two words that summed up the entire situation better than 1,000-word rant ever could. Fuck that guy. And then he did something wonderful. He finished his own lawn, skipped the middle lot entirely, the one that had started this whole mess, and rolled straight onto our narrator's yard, like nothing had happened. A quiet, deliberate act of solidarity. One old man silently telling another grown adult, "I've got your back, and that guy can deal with his own mess from now on." That's the moment the story flips. Because the angry neighbor never got the memo that his tantrum had consequences. He assumed his outburst had solved the problem. He assumed the free lawn care he'd been enjoying without lifting a finger would simply continue, minus the trespassing. What he didn't realize was that he just fired his only volunteer groundskeeper and volunteered himself for the job. The slow, beautiful collapse. Weeks passed. His lawn kept growing, and growing, and growing. What had been a modest, unremarkable lot began transforming into something closer to a nature preserve. Grass climbed past ankle height, then knee height. Weeds took hold in the gaps. And with all that overgrowth came the noise, the low, constant hum of insects that had found paradise in his neglect. Bugs so loud, so relentless, that our narrator eventually had to call the city just to get some peace at night. You could tell you were approaching that house before you ever saw it. The sound gave it away first. A buzzing, droning wall of insect noise that got louder with every step, like the lawn itself was warning you to stay back. And here's where the story earns its title. Because for weeks, this man had access to genuinely excellent lawn care, a neighbor with a riding mower, endless free time, and apparently no interest in charging a cent. All he had to do was not threaten anyone over it. Instead, his pride, his temper, and his complete inability to simply say thank you cost him the easiest deal a homeowner could ask for. And now, the jungle sitting on his property was entirely 100% his own doing. Then came the moment our narrator still laughs about. Picture it. A hot afternoon. Our narrator, relaxed on the porch, coffee in hand, enjoying the simple pleasure of doing absolutely nothing. And across the way, that same man, the one who'd shown up wheezing threats at a stranger's front door, now locked in physical combat with a cheap push mower. Every few feet, the mower choked and stalled, clogged with the sheer volume of overgrown grass it had been neglected long enough to accumulate. He'd yank the cord. It would sputter, die again, yank again, curse, repeat. It was the physical embodiment of consequences, playing out in real time on a hot afternoon for anyone on the street to see. He looked over, saw our narrator watching, sitting there, clearly entertained, clearly not offering to help. "You could be helping," he called out, still catching his breath between shoves of the dying mower. And there it was, the perfect, poetic ending to this whole ridiculous saga. Our narrator didn't even hesitate. Fuck off. Because let's be honest, this was a man who had a free, high-quality mowing service handed to him on a silver platter, and instead of a simple thank you, he chose to pound on a stranger's door and threaten violence over it. He didn't get help because he'd earned an easier fate. He earned this one sweaty, humiliated, alone, fighting his own bad decisions one clogged blade at a time. There's something deeply satisfying about a story where the punishment fits the crime so perfectly it feels almost designed. Nobody plotted revenge here. Nobody snuck out at night with sabotage in mind. The old man simply reaped exactly what his own attitude planted literally. His pride cost him a mower service, and his own overgrown yard became the loudest, buzziest monument to that mistake on the whole street. Sometimes karma doesn't need help. Sometimes it just needs you to step back, sip your coffee, and let people's own choices do the talking. If this story had you grinning by the end, smash that like button and drop a comment telling us, what's the smallest, pettiest act of karma you've ever witnessed play out in real life? We read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, real people, real neighbors, real satisfying justice, subscribe, because we've got plenty more where this came from.